Well, welcome to another episode of Beyond Ordinary Women podcast video. And today I'm Kelly Matthews. Let me just start there. And I'm one of the team members here. And today I have Kay Daigle, which is a great treat. She's our founder and executive director here at Beyond Ordinary Women. And she's going to tell us a story today. She recently went to the border with a ministry that sent a group to go minister. And so we wanted to hear what happened, who she spoke with, what did she learn, that kind of stuff, because this is a thorny issue about immigration. And the Bible has a lot to say about it. Our experience in this country is definitely, it's all over the news all the time. And Kay's experience has really impacted her. So we're just going to kind of throw out a few questions and let her talk today. Welcome, Kay.
Thank you, Kelly. Thanks for doing this.
So let's just start. Like, who did you go with and what was the purpose behind the trip?
I went with a group called Women of Welcome. You can find them at womenofwelcome.com. Okay. And they are a sister group of World Relief. And World Relief, and that's worldrelief.org. World Relief was begun by the Evangelical Immigration Table, I believe it is.
Okay.
I'll double check that. But anyway, it is a group that wanted a hands-on ministry working around the world on disasters, on refugees, on immigrants, on all sorts of practical ministries that evangelicals should have close to our heart because they are things close to God's heart. And so Women of Welcome was sort of born from World Relief, but we partnered with World Relief people in Southern California while we were there. They are people who are working with immigrants. They are people who are funding some immigrant ministries at the border. They help fund them as well as work. They train people. They work personally with immigrants who are working on getting asylum or permanent papers in all sorts of ways, practical ways they were working with immigrants. And so I was gone 4 days.
Okay.
We began on a Monday evening, just learning and preparing ourselves to go across the border into Tijuana on Tuesday. We spent all day Tuesday down at the border in Tijuana. Of course, it takes a while to get across and back, so that was part of it. On Wednesday, we learned a lot. We stayed in the United States, but we heard from all sorts of people, which gave us a lot of information about immigration laws, about what was happening at the border, just a variety of people doing a lot of things down there. So it was.
Let me answer quick. Why did you go?
That's a good question. That's a good question. For years, I think I was just naive about all sorts of issues. I was studying the Bible all the time. I was teaching the Bible. And that was pretty much my ministry, my family and teaching the Bible. But I had no idea about some of the things really that the Bible lands heavily on. Were just, I guess, as a privileged white woman, those were just out of my everyday situation. And I just did not think about it. I didn't really have a heart for it in any way, because I just, in some ways, I didn't even know there was a problem, because it wasn't my problem. And right. I can't even tell you when in my life, but at some point I realized I wasn't seeing people the way that God did. And I started asking God to help me see people as he did. So I would have the compassion and love for other people that he has. And slowly but surely he has done that, to the point that during this whole past few years, when the immigration issue has become so upfront and so public, that my heart has just been real heavy about it. And particularly when I heard of children being separated from their parents, from people being mistreated, from people being caged up, who are just desperate people leaving their countries because of danger of some kind. It just really broke my heart. So I would say over the past few years, God had prepared me. And at some point, I have a friend who was following Women of Welcome on Instagram, I believe, and she posted something, and so I started following them because I was very interested. The posts were very informational, very compassionate, and I really appreciated them. So I started following them, and then I requested to get emails from them and got that. And at some point, they just threw out, "We're going to take a trip to the border. If you're interested, you can apply." And so I did that several months ago and did not get accepted. So when I saw it again, maybe in February, early March, for a trip in April, I knew that I wanted to go. And actually, I think I'd seen more than one before when I couldn't go. It was just the wrong days for me. But this time I thought, I think I can do this. And so I applied and they accepted me. There were 15 of us that they accepted. We had women all over the country with all sorts of ministries, backgrounds. It was a very interesting and wonderful group to be with.
So it's a Christian organization or faith-based?
Christian organization, yes.
Okay.
And both World Relief and Women of Welcome are trying to advocate for biblical treatment of people at the border.
Are they working with the authorities or directly with the immigrants?
They're working directly with immigrants, not the authorities, although we met some Border Patrol while we were there. So yeah, they're working. What they're doing with the authorities is advocating for laws that are unjust, laws that are inhumane, advocating against those, advocating for more humane treatment, for allowing more people who have been displaced. There are over 100 million people who have been displaced in our world because of war or famine, all sorts of things. And that number, I have the number here, is growing by 37,000, more than 37,000 people a day. And
is that worldwide?
Worldwide. But our country has done very little. We allow very few people, considering how many people need a safe place to live, to raise their families.
When you went to Tijuana, you guys crossed over into Mexico and started working with the people on that side. They were waiting. Were they trying to get applications finished? Were they in line?
We were really not a work group. We were a group that was there to look and watch. We were there to listen. We were there to learn, and we were there to pray. And
so you spoke with them, with different people who were waiting?
Different people. We went to a couple of places in particular where women were in charge of ministering to immigrants in some way. And the first place, the woman's name is Maria, and her ministry is housed right around the corner from where the American authorities, right by the border, basically, where the American authorities open a door and they shoo out all the people that are being deported that day. They all come out about 5 p.m. I believe that's what she told us. When they come out, she is a place that people will tell them to go. And she does not have a shelter, but she does have some food for them. She can contact shelters if they are people that know no one in Tijuana. She helps them find what they need, and she ministers to people who are there in Tijuana who are not native Tijuanans. They are migrants, and most of them are trying to get into the United States. She ministers to them. She has sewing classes there. They have English classes there. just in many ways, she ministers to them. And then the second place that we visited was a church that became a shelter to COVID, or right before COVID. I'm not sure, but in that time period, the woman there told us that one evening her husband, who was the pastor of the church, was just out doing something and ran into some people who stopped him and said they needed someplace to stay. And of course, his heart went out to them. He knew he needed to help, so he brought him to the church. And he and his wife got into a conversation and realized that, why can't our church be a shelter all the time? Why can't we open it to more people? And so we visited that church, which is a shelter now. And even though the pastor, her husband, died during COVID, he died of COVID, she has taken over and is doing this on her own. And these two women were truly amazing. The first woman in the other ministry, she actually lives in San Diego. She's Hispanic, but she lives in San Diego, and she crosses the border 5 days a week to minister and open this storefront place that she has. And on the other 2 days, she works so that she can pay for her own rent and live and put whatever money she has left over into this ministry. And she's 76 years old. So she could be doing nothing, and feel like she
retired.
She could be retired, enjoying it. But instead, she crosses every day, and she crosses back. And sometimes that can take hours. Hours. I got in a conversation with a man while we were trying to get in, and we were just walking toward the border. And he was coming out of he had just been allowed into the United States. And he also lived in San Diego, works over in Tijuana every day. And of course, they have ways you can get sort of fast passes to get in. But even with the fast pass, I asked him, I said, how long does it take you? He said, oh, probably usually around an hour, but it can take as much as 3 hours.
Just to get there.
What this lady is also going through every day to go minister to people.
Do you have any idea how she gets her supplies? Does she take donations? Does she buy them in Mexico and provide them from there?
I'm sure she would have to get them in Mexico because
transporting them across wouldn't.
You don't want to take a car or truck across the border. That's a really long way. That's not impossible. So I'm sure she buys it all in Tijuana. World Relief gives both of these women's ministries some money. I know it's not enough. She said also, they raise money through, she has some other partners, and then she gives some of her own money. She just gives some of her own money.
Okay.
And so, I mean, these are just heroes.
So these are individuals doing what they can. They live near, they're in that area. That's part of their reality. Is immigration is just part of their culture right there on the border. Absolutely. So it's not for us, right? We don't live near the border. We're in Texas, so we hear a lot about it, but we're far enough away that it's not an immediate reality to us. What kind of suggestions do you have? What, just reflections after your visit for us, the church, not just here in Dallas, but throughout the U.S., of how, what kind of reaction, what kind of actions should we be taking? What are some directions that we can go to, just like those women are ministering hands-on? What can we do, right? We know we don't have to be at the border. We know that there are refugees sent throughout the country as they wait for their paperwork to process. So they're kind of all over.
Right. Well, I think one thing that might help us is to think about the different groups of immigrants that we have in the United States, because we don't all have the kind of immigrants that we're getting down at the southern border near us, but we might have some of the other types of immigrants. A refugee is someone who's been forced to flee his or her country because of war, violence, or persecution, often without warning. And what we normally think of as refugees are usually coming from Africa, from the Middle East, from Europe, because many of them are coming from camps because they've been displaced because of war. They're coming from camps where they've lived for several years. They have been trying to get into the United States for years, but the waiting list is so long and we allow so few to come in that that doesn't happen very quickly. An immigrant is someone who leaves his or her home country and moves to a foreign country with the intention of settling there. So that would include any immigrants that come to our United States. And there are several ways you can get in through visas. They give visas to people who have family who already live here, but sometimes those visas can take up to 20 years for them to be approved.
Wow.
The rest of the family to come over. Or they could be work visas. People have work visas also, and I'm not going to go into all the types of visas. But one of the groups that can come in are asylum seekers, and those are mainly what we see at the southern border. It's someone who has fled his or her country and professes a credible fear of persecution, but whose case has not been adjudicated by the government or the host country. And then just somebody you would call a migrant is someone who is moving from place to place within his or her country or across borders, usually for economic reasons such as seasonal work. And, you know, being in Texas, we know that there have always been migrants from Mexico that we've given work visas to come.
Yeah, they come and go.
And come and go. So I think we're used to that kind of thing. But the asylum seekers are really a type of refugee, but the difference is that they haven't been over in these countries where they've been settled somewhere and are trying to get into the United States. They're people who are coming from the South, from within the Americas, and the law in the United States allows someone to request asylum at the border. It also says that anybody on American soil can request asylum. And that's part of the reason we've had so many crossing the border, not at the border ports, but across the whole South, is because if they can get across, they are looking for the Border Patrol. They aren't planning to be here illegally. They're looking for the Border Patrol. They're trying to flag them down and say, we're requesting asylum because. And what they do at that point is they interview them to determine if there's really a credible fear. If it really looks like they might get asylum, that they have evidence that they might get asylum, they're from a country where we accept the idea that there's persecution or something like that, then they let them stay in the United States, and within about 5 or 6 months, they will let them start working here, but it's all temporary because they need a final hearing in front of an immigration judge. And the problem is, this is one of the big problems with our immigration system. Congress has not funded enough of them. And so somebody can come into the country, they can have a credible fear, but they're not going to see the immigration judge for 4.5 years. That's the average, 4.5 years. So they come, they can start working, but in 4.5 years, they may be deported out of the country. So they've started a life here.
Right.
The time is too long. It is unfair to people. That's not justice. You need to hear their stories much more easily. So that's one of the big failures of the laws that we presently have, and the fact that we aren't willing to fund it to take care of all these people.
So you may or may not know the answers to these. I'm just throwing.
Yeah, I don't know everything. I'm not an expert.
That's totally fine. You may have met people like this, perhaps, if they come and they seek asylum, but they're denied. Do you know what happens to them?
Yeah, they're deported.
Like pretty quickly.
Probably deported now. Now, I do know that they can apply for another type. They can apply for a visa possibly of another type, maybe a school. You can get an educational visa also. Maybe they'll start going to school, try some other way to stay.
But when you originally said, those who are coming to seek asylum, if they're from a country that we recognize, that could be a real possibility that they need it. But that would be kind of an initial interview. Like,
there's some sort of initial interview that I believe the Border Patrol does. And they determine, and then they determine who can stay and who has to be deported immediately. If someone is caught at the border and they're from Mexico, for instance, there is no legal way for a Mexican resident, Mexican citizen to come to the United States right now. None, unless they have a family. It would be one of the family visas or something like that. But
they would come.
There's no asylum.
Hopefully.
There's no asylum for them. So if somebody came over from Mexico, they would just immediately be deported because they cannot get asylum here. That's not a possibility.
Right. So it's going to be from Central America and beyond.
Right. So they do that initial hearing and someone can stay, but then they can't work until they get this work permit. So for those months that they're waiting to get the work permit, they cannot work. They are at the mercy of churches. They're at the mercy of ministries. They're at the mercy of maybe family members that they've moved in with, and they have to live off the good graces of those family members in order to make it. And so as you talk about what's a way we can help, they are requiring more and more of these immigrants. I know that refugees have to have sponsors. And I believe they're starting to say that asylum seekers have to have sponsors in order to get here. And as Maria, the lady at the border that's right around the corner from the border, as she said, many of them know no one in the United States.
Right.
Getting a sponsorship is, what are they supposed to do? She also mentioned that to go through the system, you have to have a smartphone.
Right.
You can't do
it. That app. I've heard that there's a new app.
You cannot do it. You cannot do it. And she said, these people are not necessarily coming with smartphones. They know no one. How are they supposed to get a sponsor? Well, that's a way that people and churches need to find ways to help. I know one of the women who traveled with me is from Iowa. And she was talking about that some of the churches in the area, she works at a place that deals with immigrants. And these are mostly refugees from other, places. But she said that their churches there, the whole church sponsors several families. And that means they're looking out for them. They're making sure that they're learning English. They're making sure that they have what they need. So that is a way that we can help. We can do it as a family. You can do it as an individual. You can do it as a church. The church having several families would be a great thing, because that way there would be a number of immigrants there together. So that's that is just one way that people can help. Now, as far as us helping people down at the border, a lot of that has to come through the people that are working there. So monetarily, donating gifts is really important. World Relief that were partnering with us and doing all the teaching, they do a fantastic job. I was so impressed with them and what they were doing there.
If we looked up different organizations that are providing aid at the southern U.S. border, and kind of look for some of those. There's kind of different aid, because what World Relief is doing is working with the immigrants, but they do help fund some of these. The two groups that I talked about that were in Tijuana that we visited, they help fund those, but they aren't necessarily over there themselves giving out water or anything. But there are groups that do that, because I have for several years given to a group that does that at the Texas border, and they also do it down in some of the countries in Central America as well, knowing that many of these
asylum seekers are coming through there in order to get here.
Okay. Did your experience, or over the last few years, as you've been more aware of this whole issue of immigration and the struggles that immigrants go through, did it point you to anything in particular, any Bible passage or concept that really helped solidify your new conviction that we need to be actively involved in helping them?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I think part of really what started making me aware of that was just reading through the Bible
Mm-hmm.
enough that you start noticing what God says about different things that maybe you hadn't noticed before.
Mm-hmm.
What God says about the stranger, or in the Hebrew Bible, the same word as yours used, but our various translations may call them sojourners, strangers, foreigners,
Aliens, yeah.
aliens,
Mm-hmm.
yes. And so all of those are the same word, and it all refers to people who are not native to the local
Mm-hmm.
area.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of those instructions to the Hebrew nation under God's law tell us what God's heart is for immigrants, for people who need a safe place to live. And of course, we know that God's heart is for families. He wants families together. So that is part of what I think is really important as far as treating them humanely, is to keep families together, to try to work through those things. But I think for me, and probably for many of the people who listen to this, I mean, we want to know what Jesus said about this. And of course, in the Sermon on the Mount, he says, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And I've really just not been able to get that out of my mind when I think of these asylum seekers, refugees, people who really need our help. They're desperate people, or they wouldn't be leaving their country. They're desperate. They're leaving the home, the only home they've ever known, and they're doing it because they're desperate to come to a safe place. And if that were me, and my kids are grown now, but if I had children and we were in a place where I know that there are many places where these gangs or cartels kidnap the boys and force them into being part of that, I would have taken my son out of there as well and tried to go to a safe place. And so that is, to me, a real important passage. Another important passage, of course, is the Good Samaritan, which begins with Jesus talking to a man and ask him, what are the greatest commandments? And he answers and says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and your neighbors yourself. And Jesus said, yes, you're right. And then in order to justify himself, however, he says, who is my neighbor? Because if we're loving our neighbor as ourselves, it's like do unto others. It's very similar. We're giving them what we would want in that situation. We're looking out for their best interest the way we would look out for our best interest. And of course, the Good Samaritan, I mean, you've got a man traveling, which these people are doing. You've got a man in danger, which these people are in danger. You've got someone who needs your practical help, and he gives it to them. But it is somebody who is a stranger, is somebody who is actually, his ethnicity would say that he's an enemy of our country. And yet the very enemy is the person who helps.
The story of Ruth really comes to mind as well. And I know that's almost a cliche sometimes, but that she was a foreigner who immigrated to Bethlehem and was poor, gleaned the fields. God had a way. He had already kind of established a means of supporting the poor, and telling the wealthy landowners, no, you need to leave some out there for them. Let them come work. Let them come and get food. So she does that. And then, it goes on, right? They realize, wow, we have a relative here who can help. And she challenges him in their faith that she's come to believe to go further than just the help he had to give, right? And so,
Right.
yeah, he ends up marrying her, and it's all great. But it's just a kind of a life story of watching the gospel come to life, you know.
Absolutely. Or you think about Abraham, God told him to immigrate to
Hmm.
another country, and he was a
Hmm.
stranger there. And,
Hmm.
it's just Jesus himself came to earth. This was not his native place, was it not? I
Hmm.
mean, he became a man so that he could serve us. He came and lived as we live to serve us.
Hmm.
Um, there's no better example than what Jesus did for us. Sacrificial love is what is needed, I think. And the sad thing is, Pew Research did a study that came out just a few months ago. Only 21% of the evangelicals that answered this question said that the Bible would be the most important thing for them to consider when treating immigrants,
Hmm. Hmm.
which flabbergasts me. Um, we we are evangelicals. We think that the Bible is important for us to learn from, and this is where we get our guidance for daily life.
Hmm.
And yet, only 21% said that it had anything to do with immigration. So,
That seems like just ignorance, sometimes willful, but sometimes it's never taught.
well, it's not. We
Yeah.
really don't talk about it,
Hmm.
and um, I don't know. It's
Hmm.
a discipleship issue that needs to
Hmm.
be taken care of. But if we look at the Bible, we look at the character of God. God loves and cares for people who are
Hmm.
who are not from here, people
Hmm.
not like us, people who we might fear. And that's another problem, I think. I think the church has fallen for too many of the political pundits who whip up our fear of immigrants,
Hmm.
who make it sound like we're being invaded. These people, they're coming for safety. They're not trying
Hmm.
to overcome us.
Hmm.
They just want to come and work. We
Hmm.
we got to listen to the stories of a couple of young men who are both in the United States. One is an asylum seeker. He and his
Hmm.
wife, and they have a baby, are seeking asylum, and he's from Afghanistan. He said he traveled through 9 different countries to get to the United States. And he came in over the southern border in Tijuana. And he can't work yet because he hasn't been here long enough.
Yeah.
And he said, I just wish I could work. I just wish I could help provide. I really wish that were the case. And he's coming from a country that has very few freedoms, and his wife would have basically none.
Hmm.
Um, he's so excited. He's so happy that we have allowed him to come, but he's very
Hmm.
fearful that he won't get to stay. And the other young man is from Venezuela, and he's been here
Hmm.
for several years on a student visa, but he originally came with his dad because his dad had been kidnapped, and the family had to sell everything they had to,
Hmm.
or I guess maybe not sell everything, but all the assets that they had to gather, they had to
Hmm.
liquidate and give to these kidnappers for his dad to get back. And he said it was really miraculous that his dad came home at all, but he said that the statistics showed that if they've been kidnapped once, they'll try you again.
Hmm.
So he and his dad had to flee Venezuela at the time to
Hmm.
get here. And his own and being here on a student visa, if he leaves, and the laws change, which this keeps happening all the time. And Maria talked to us about that. She said that, and in fact, the Border Patrol talked to us about that when we talked to them. They said it is so difficult because the presidents keep changing everything. The Congress keeps changing everything. I mean, there's nothing you can depend on. And so you're afraid to cross the border and go visit your mother, as this young
Might
man
not get
is,
back
because
in.
they might ever let him back in. So he said he
Right.
hasn't seen his mother in 9 years, and we asked him, what could we pray for? He said, pray that I can see my mother.
Yeah.
You know, it just breaks your heart.
Mhm.
We need some new laws, and we need to be advocating for those. You know, in fact, Proverbs 31:8 says, speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. We need to be speaking up, and World Relief is one place you can do that. If you go there, they have I don't know if it's a page that you can go to advocate. And when you put all your information on there, they know who your representatives are, who your senators are. And if something comes up, they will send you a text, they'll send you an email and say, would you advocate for this? They tell you what it is. And
Right. So the different laws.
Yes, you can choose to speak up about those laws. Recently, Florida was trying to pass, you may have read about it, was trying to pass a law that said that it was illegal to have an immigrant that wasn't legally in the United States in your car with you, to take them anywhere. And the Christian pastors and their congregations stood up to this, particularly the Hispanic congregation. They said, you're making it illegal for us to do what we have to do for our faith. Our faith says that we have to take care of people. I have to feed people. I couldn't even bring them to church with this law. And they did not pass it.
So when you say illegal, who's classified as illegal? All the asylum seekers? Or
I'm sorry, I'm not used to not using words yet, but illegal is not really a good word to use for immigrants, because, and I had thought I'd stopped using a long time ago, but anyway, but because these are people made in the image of God, they aren't illegal people. And that it is very a prejudicial term to use. Undocumented is a much better word to use from them.
But it sounded like you were using the language of the law that was trying to put a bill.
Yes. But you could say they're unlawfully present, and these are the reasons that they would be unlawfully present: that they've entered the United States without inspection. That's what the people down at the border who are just coming across to the Rio Grande are doing. Or they overstay a temporary visa, and apparently about half of those in the country who are undocumented, that is why. Or they violate the terms of their visa. So I'm not sure exactly what that entails, but something about the visa, and some of that is how long you can stay. And there are other.
But the ones who come across undocumented, are those the ones that most or many of them immediately are looking for Border Patrol so that they can?
Most of them are asylum seekers.
And some of them, then others would be those who are just trying to get in and go find their people and just go work. Do whatever.
Yes, that's exactly right. When we talked to the Border Patrol, well, you know, the border was totally locked down until just last week, I think it was. And so nobody could come through the ports. So all those people that wanted to come in were coming in ways that were not legal. And there needs to be a legal way to get in, and then all these people aren't going to cross the borders. And the Border Patrol told us, they said, if the laws would change so that they could have good ways to process people when they're coming in at the actual border crossing, then they could spend their time doing why they joined the Border Patrol. They joined the Border Patrol to get rid of the bad guys, to not let the smugglers, to not let the drug people in. You know, that's why they wanted to be in the Border Patrol. And they said, instead, we're dealing with all these people that we really aren't equipped to deal with. If the laws were changed where coming across the border, you know, isn't going to be considered at all, and they had good places to legally process them when they come in, then the Border Patrol could do what they're there for.
Right. Yeah. Too many people, not enough resources.
Absolutely.
To process them through. So yeah, laws need to change, but also it sounds like hearts need to change, whether that's in the church or anywhere else.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
look at,
I mean, just like mine did. My heart I needed to be more compassionate about people who were struggling. I didn't struggle in those kinds of ways that they do. We all struggle, but I wasn't struggling with safety of my family. I wasn't struggling with not having food on my table, or not even knowing where to sleep at night, because I'm in a place where I am not from, because I had to live there.
Yeah.
So it's just a big issue. It's not like the Bible gives us every policy, you know, to follow, but the Bible does show us that God cares about these people, that we should be loving them. We should be, they're made in his image. We should be treating them humanely. And those are the kinds of things that we can advocate for.
That sounds like a great place to wrap up.
I think so too.
Thank you for sharing your experience and the way you've been wrestling with this whole issue over the last year or two, or however longer it was, and how it moved you to action. And so I think anyone who's watching or listening, we've given them a few things to think about, and hopefully some resources. If you have any specific websites, we could put those in the notes.
Yes, we'll put that on our website, and you go to the menu under resources, and I think it's called Video Podcast Extras. And I will put a resource on there with a list of some places that you can donate, and different types of places, depending on what they do, and some suggestions for what you do about the refugees, if you have them in your city.
Right.
Where, of course, we have thousands of them in the Dallas area.
So if you're a pastor for women, or director, anybody on staff who can consider utilizing the resources of a church even, then this would also be a place to go to get started with some ideas.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, thanks, Kay. Appreciate it.
Kelly.
Look forward to hearing how this rolls out in the future.
I know. A lot of prayer. We need to pray too. I don't want to leave that out. But prayer and
exactly. Action. That's right. All right. Thanks very much.
Okay.